So, Kristin, at the break, you had just told us, basically told us about the story of C8 and the inspiration and the primary subject of The Devil We Know, which is a film that you are working on that, of course, is also executive produced by Morgan Spurlock and directed by Stephanie Sotig. And you guys are raising funds for this money now. I'm surprised that you don't get a lot of corporate sponsors. I'm joking about that. And you made the point that C8, which is a chemical that we can find in about nearly 100% of our blood, or I should say 100% of Americans' blood across the country. It's as far north as the North Pole and all around the country, in part because all around the world, in part because C8 is such a durable material. I mean, if we were to take a helium balloon and have it circle the globe and it would never dissipate, eventually everybody would see it at one point. And in some respects, that's what's happening with C8. But you made the point right at the break that C8 was simply the best, I guess, hook to hang this broader story of chemicals and the problems with industrial chemicals and how it impacts our society. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think there's an assumption, I know that even I consider myself a pretty well-informed person, but there's an assumption that if you go to a grocery store or if you go to a drugstore and you buy something off the shelves in this country, you know, that everything in that is safe. That every ingredient that goes into products that you buy are safe. And unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that people have said this in the film, is that chemicals are essentially innocent until proven guilty. That's the system that we have set up in this country. So we have more than 80,000 chemicals, something like 88,000 chemicals on the marketplace in the United States, and the overwhelming majority of them are completely untested by any regulatory agency. So that means the only people testing them are the companies that stand to profit from them. So, you know, in the case of DuPont and this particular chemical, they kept information from the EPA, and they were eventually sued by the EPA and fined by the EPA for this. But this is not something that just DuPont is doing. I mean, there are tons of chemicals on the marketplace, and we have to sort of in good faith trust that if companies are finding any measurable toxic effects on animals and their workers, that they are alerting authorities to it. But the system that we have is just so broken that, you know, the EPA or independent scientists don't test any of these chemicals before they go to market. So when there's a problem with a chemical, as was the case with C8, we were exposed to this chemical, all of us in this country and everybody around the world was exposed to this chemical in products, in our drinking water supply, in the air we breathe for decades and decades and decades before anybody ever knew anything about it.
And we should say, I mean, I imagine you know the numbers, but I know there are people out there going, well, but if these companies knew that this product was so dangerous, surely they would realize that at one point the jig would be up and they would have to pay fines, or they would be held to account in the court of public opinion. And I guess people can ask themselves, do they think DuPont has been held in the court of public opinion for this? Because the story's been out. Like you said, it was in the New York Times, over a year ago now. I don't think they have.
No, I don't think they have either. And that was sort of stunning to us that when we read this article, and it was so big and so, I mean, just incredibly powerful and just damning because of these internal documents. I mean, there's really no wiggle room here. I mean, they knew exactly what they were doing, and for decades and decades and decades, and they just decided to sweep it under the rug until they got sued. But I definitely, it has not gotten a lot of media attention at all. I mean, Sharon Lerner, who writes for The Intercept, did an incredible 12-part series on this, and she's featured in the film, and her reporting has just been outstanding, and she's won awards for it. But in terms of, like, breaking into really the mainstream and, you know, having people know about this, it definitely hasn't. And I think DuPont has such name recognition and Teflon has such name recognition that we're hopeful that with the film, we can hold them to account a bit more.
And, I mean, let's also be clear about something. This is not something that ABC, NBC, CBS, any of the cable news networks are going to cover until they have to, because and you can just watch till the commercial break to get a sense of why, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's going on. There is just too much money that is paid in there. A, and B, I want you to just go back, though, and explain that not only is there no, there's been no essentially accountability in terms of the court of public opinion, but the dollar amounts that we're talking about, their fines that they pay, the amount of money that they've paid out is beyond inconsequential, right, in terms of what their profits have been. I mean, everybody would love those type of operating costs.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's funny because the EPA sort of built it up as the largest fine of this type that they had ever levied on a company, but I believe it was $1.6 million, which is just, to say it's a drop in the bucket for DuPont is an understatement, So yeah, I mean, there was no incentive for them financially to stop doing what they were doing because they were making a ton of money off of this product. It was cheaper for them to dispose of it the irresponsible way that they were disposing of it rather than incinerate it, and they just thought they would just go along with what they were doing until they got caught, and somebody forced them to stop. So yeah, it's a pretty sad situation, and again, I think the fact that this sort of fine, which was historic at the time, was so small in comparison to their profits from this product goes to show that the way that this is actually going to be remedied is through our judicial system, through the lawsuits that have gone up against it. So, I mean, as you know, because Mike Papantonio has been intimately involved in this, now DuPont has settled with the 3,500 plaintiffs that have brought cases against them. So that will be, more of a financial consequence for them, but still, probably not enough.
And frankly, that's where your film comes in, right? I mean, we only have 30 seconds left, but I mean, that's the idea, is that to make the public aware, not just of what DuPont has done, but of this dynamic that impacts everyone's lives in some fashion or another, where it's basically just the cost of doing business to poison people and to poison our environment. People should check it out. The Devil We Know. They can find it on Indiegogo. Kristin, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.
Hi, I'm Morgan Spurlock, and I am so excited to be a part of this new film about one of the greatest environmental scandals of our time. The Devil We Know exposes how a toxic chemical, found in a product we use every single day, contaminated the small town of Parkersburg, West Virginia, the place where I was born and raised.
And chances are that you too have this chemical called C8 or PFOA in your blood. C8 is found in the blood of 99.7% of Americans. And The Devil We Know tells the story of how it got there and how it wound up in countless communities around the world. Most notably, C8 is used in the making of Teflon, invented by DuPont, one of the largest chemical companies in the world.
This non-stick finish for cookware never needs scouring. DuPont Teflon saves me lots of dirty work.
For over 50 years, the chemical has been used in a number of consumer products. From the carpeting our babies crawl on, to dental floss, waterproof clothing, and pizza boxes. It has been dumped into our drinking water, pumped out of factory smokestacks, and detected in some of our most popular crops like apples and green beans. Incredibly, if it wasn't for the courage of a handful of citizens in West Virginia, we'd never even know this chemical existed. Because of their efforts, we now know internal memos dating back to the 60s show the company was immediately concerned about the chemical's impact on human health. By the early 90s, they suspected C8 was a possible human carcinogen, but continued to use it anyway. Since that time, studies have linked exposure, even at low doses, to some very serious health problems. At its core, this is a fascinating story of greed and irresponsibility by a company that chose to put the dollar sign ahead of human health. But it brings to bear a much larger social issue, the lack of oversight on the chemical industry, which has resulted in more than 80,000 synthetic chemicals being released onto the market with almost no outside testing. When Fed Up, my film about the processed food industry, came out 3 years ago, I really got to see in action how film can empower an audience to affect change on both a personal and a policy level. I believe The Devil We Know can have the same meaningful impact, but we need your help. Your contribution will go towards funding post-production, as well as the larger goal of informing the public at large and fighting for chemical reform. But we can't do it without you.
With the Trump administration gutting the EPA and filling its ranks with chemical industry insiders, the timing of this film is more important than ever. So we hope that you will join us in getting it out into the world. Thank you.